even a shred of documented proof that these people are the original people from the Holy Land is crazy. There's way more proof to the contrary, which they've stopped printing, even their own textbooks, which they've stopped printing, that point to the fact that they came from Turkey, the Turkic Ashkenaz tribe, Turkic Ashkenaz tribe, Turkic Ashkenaz tribe.
So it's a wholesale assault on freedom of speech in our society. And it was led by these people, the same billionaire class.
That cut checks. And this is the problem when you take the money, which I say you fight the king's wars. How did Trump get into office? Who cut him the checks? Like, who cut him a $100 million check? Miriam Adelson. And so the presidency can be bought, okay? There's no question.
Yes, I think.
As all things in America, there is a certain level where you can outright purchase influence. And it's hard for us to recognize that. And I had to really come to terms with that. This has been hard for me as someone who has been a vocal supporter of Trump, truly believed that he sort of beat the billionaire class to get into office, to see him so radically in this term specifically shift on his perspectives of speech. I actually feel watching him pains me to see this administration play twister to explain, while we're free speech, but, this is different. These are Hamas supporters, all of these psychological games. And you're not instantly a Hamas supporter if you have questions about what's going on over there. And by the way, they also gaslight us where they're like, then they get to you're obsessed with us. It's like, no, you guys were the ones that insisted that we all have a perspective on October 7th. And so when some of us actually said, okay, well, let me get educated because maybe let me roll my sleeves up and be radically pro-Israel. Then when we looked and we pierced that veil, we went, oh my goodness, how was I ever pro-Israel? And now you want us to shut up. Now you want our influence gone. Now you want to smear us as anti-Semites and Hamas supporters. And it really is telling.
Well, there are two aspects. Number one, this is America. You're allowed to be a Hamas supporter. That's our freedom. I am not a flag waver, but facts are facts. That's what was determined by our Supreme Court. And secondly, they're not. I mean, you're correct. They're not.
They're not, and even if they were.
Yeah. Exactly. They're not.
And even if they were.
That was what the judge said. The judge said, I disagree with a lot of the things these people say. But that's their right.
And I just also want to say this to just kind of get this off of my chest, because this is what deeply troubles me the most, going back to your slave analogy, which is actually not an analogy. What it feels like to me when these, and now I recognize Jewish supremacists, supported me and platformed me when I was attacking BLM. Because I recognized this altogether Marxist strand, and I was saying, and I stood up to my own people, right? My own people, and said, let me tell you why this is not going to work out. Let me tell you Granddad's lessons. I wrote an entire book. You're amazing, Candace. Let me get you this platform, that platform, fly you here. And then when I was like, oh yeah, and I know this is going to be hard for you, but you guys are not going to have to stand up to the Jew. Get out of here. Get out of here. You are gone. You are banned from Australia for speech. I mean, think about this. This is crazy. And I'm going, so what was I?
Daily Wire issued gag order against Candace Owens during public debate negotiations, right? Okay, so let me read this story because, I'm sure you have great feedback to give to both sides on this. So conservative news and commentary outlet The Daily Wire has reportedly obtained gag order against former podcast host Candace Owens. The news reported allegations alleges despite company co-founder Ben Shapiro claiming that he wanted to debate her on the Israel-Palestine issue, Owens' 3-year stint at the Daily Wire ended in March following months of tensions between the professional provocateur and her fellow network personalities. The subject of the Israel-Hamas was proved to be a particularly divisive issue for Owens and Shapiro. Owens has taken a firm stance against it, American involvement in foreign wars, including the one in Gaza. Shapiro, an Orthodox Jew, has criticized other Republicans for their declining support for both Israel and Ukraine, stressing America's national security interests in both conflicts.
It at least makes me happy to hear you acknowledge that there's a demon. It's the strangest thing to me when these people are treating Bibi Netanyahu like he is their Christ.
The largest ever U.S. delegation to Israel just took place. 250 state legislators from all 50 states arrived Monday for an event called 50 States, One Israel. They planted 50 trees at a site of the October 7th attacks and met with Israeli leaders. Netanyahu's office called it the biggest bipartisan visit of American lawmakers to Israel. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar urged them to push anti-BDS laws in their states, which are meant to discourage boycotts of Israel. So far, 38 states have already adopted such measures. Sa'ar described BDS as part of a coordinated global effort against Israel, saying the best response has been anti-BDS legislation. But the trip's timing sparked controversy. The very next day, the UN ruled for the first time that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, while Israel relaunched its ground invasion of Gaza City. And despite its scale and timing, this massive visit has barely been covered by international media. Only local Israeli outlets reported on it, leaving many to question why such a major event went largely unnoticed.
It at least makes me happy to hear you acknowledge that there's a demon. It's the strangest thing to me when these people are treating Bibi Netanyahu like he is their Christ.
And you know what else, Jim? I just want to say this to our Christian friends, you know, just to call it as it is and say it straight out, you know, you guys are worshiping one Jew. That's a mistake. You should be worshiping every single one of us, because we all die for your sins every single day. And that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah. We're all God's firstborn, and we're dying for your sins right now because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are the bulwark against the orcs. Okay? The orcs are coming not to a theater near you, but to your home.
And that is what makes it a disgusting heresy, right? Like, it's just to misinterpret the Bible so much that you're basically platforming and honoring what Bibi Netanyahu does, avoiding the topic, not acknowledging that what he's doing to the Palestinians is wrong. Having love for Jerusalem, that makes sense. Having love to be able to walk in Jerusalem and to see the relics, that all makes sense to me. And I think I'm just more disgusted by people who turn a blind eye to everything that's happened to the Palestinians. It just makes me sick. And to see him on camera acting like such a gangster, and people pretending that he's holy, or that there's even a shred of documented proof that these people are the original people from the Holy Land, is crazy. There's way more proof to the contrary, which they've stopped printing, even their own textbooks, which they've stopped printing, that point to the fact that they came from Turkey, the Turkic Ashkenazi tribe that came down, began speaking Yiddish, and then needed a place to go after World War II. It's crazy to me. The whole thing's crazy. Again, I would debate anybody on that topic. Definitely feeling especially fired up about it.
I just had a rabbi give me an analogy. He said, look, imagine you left your home and then someone came and occupied it, and then you try to get it back, and then they went to the judge. Have you heard some of these analogies? Maybe you can.
Yeah, that's assuming that, you know, that's taking it into a place which I don't usually go. That's making the assumption that today's Jews are really the descendants of the ancient Hebrews that used to live in that part of the world some 3,000 years ago.
There's way more proof to the contrary, which they've stopped printing, even their own textbooks, which they've stopped printing, that point to the fact that they came from Turkey, the Turkic Ashkenazi tribe that came down, began speaking Yiddish, and then needed a place to go after World War II. It's crazy to me. The whole thing's crazy. Again, I would debate anybody on that topic. Definitely feeling especially fired up about it.
Immediately after, Candace Owens went to Twitter and said, I'd like to have a debate with Ben Shapiro about Israel. The Daily Wire ran into an arbitration proceeding and requested that an arbitrator put a gag order on Candace Owens and order her blocked, banned from criticizing the Daily Wire or Ben Shapiro in any way. And none of this was disclosed by the Daily Wire. They had led their audience to believe that they actually wanted a debate with Candace Owens. And yet at the same time, in secret, they were arguing to the arbitrator that the way in which Candace Owens asked for this debate, the expressions of criticism she had voiced about Ben Shapiro, the fact that she had liked multiple tweets that were criticizing Ben Shapiro in the Daily Wire, meant that Candace Owens, by negotiating and asking for this debate, had in fact engage in disparagement of the Daily Wire in a way that violated her contract, and they therefore convinced an arbitrator in secret that they were likely to win if they sued Candace Owens for breach of contract, and the only remedy possible would be to gag Candace Owens from talking about the Daily Wire or Ben Shapiro in any way critically.
What do you think about that?
Okay, I like it. I'll tell you what, I like the move. This is a very smart move by the Daily Wire. You got to remember, it's not Ben Shapiro anymore. He made his decision. Organizations protect themselves. And when they have a contract with you, they will immediately do this. Now, Glenn, the truth is enough. Glenn doesn't have to say they went in secret. Arbitration is what it is. You know what I mean? It's in your contract. So it's not like they're sneaking around. But so, he doesn't need that drama to it. But the reality is, you're saying one thing to me, but now you got your boys exercising a right on my contract. And you have to look at the reason why, okay? The Daily Wire doesn't believe that Shapiro wins the debate with Candace Owens.
You think they believe that?
100%. Otherwise, there's no reason to do it.
I want to talk to you about the Holocaust, and please allow me to be offensive, as I've been learning a lot about the Holocaust and why it is such a precious area where you are not allowed. There's no incursion. You can't ask a question. You can't even, if I said, you know what, I think it was 5 million, forget it. I mean, it is very precious and protected. And as I've sort of began reading more books, I do have a theory, and you may be offended by this theory, and you can push back on it. But particularly, I felt even more confirmed in this theory. Are you familiar with Nicholas Gruner?
No.
Okay, so Nicholas Gruner was an actual Auschwitz camp survivor. He was on the march, same march as your parents were on.
My father.
Yeah, your father was on, and he wrote a book in Yiddish about his experiences. And there was his friend who was with him on this walk, who he wanted to reunite, wrote this book in Yiddish. And when he found out that his friend had wrote this book and it had been translated into English, he went to go meet him, right? And it was like, I'm going to be reunited with somebody who was in this camp with me. He gets up to shaking this person's hand, and he's like, "You've taken on the identity. This you're not the real survivor." That person whose hand he shook was Elie Wiesel. You might be familiar with him because he wrote the book Night, and it was proven that he lied about certain parts of it. Nobody knew why, what this was. And so he then spent the rest of his life, Nicholas Gruner, dedicated to telling people that this man was effectively a gypsy who stole the identity of a real person. And he said, Nicholas rolled up his sleeve. He's like, we all have tattoos. He's not going to have one because he's not the real guy. This guy took his identity.
You say, where the name Ashkenazi came from? So a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany. They looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, so they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken, okay? It's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin, anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false, zero truth to it. Just study the history.
Look, man, I mean, I will, as I always think I do, like confess when I don't really know enough about a subject, but I don't know enough to like know this for sure. But I am pretty convinced that everything Netanyahu's saying there is bullshit. And the fact that it's like, oh, the Jews are genetically the same Jews from the Bible. Like, I don't think anyone can actually demonstrate that.
Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now, I bet you thought it was going to be a lot crazier than that, right? Now, you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel. But according to Israeli law, the fact that I have Jewish blood gives me more right to somebody's home and land in the land of Palestine than somebody that has been there for hundreds of years. Doesn't make sense.
Which is a kind of strange thing, because it kind of seems like if that's your whole claim, then like, wouldn't you be the ones who wanna demonstrate this. The truth is that, like, Sephardic Jews, I know this much, that Sephardic Jews and Arabs have like incredibly similar DNA, and that the European Ashkenazi Jews like me and Rob have distinct differences from them. And so I just don't think, again, I do not know enough to know this for sure, but I just don't think it's at all scientifically demonstrated that, like, no, these people are the ones who originally come from that land.
Well, it turns out that Elie Wiesel was a cousin to Robert Maxwell, right? Fascinating, right? Absolutely fascinating. Robert Maxwell wrote about it in his own book, his authorized biography. And we know Robert Maxwell, obviously, who everything about there is to know about him. And I was fascinated by this idea that there were people who were stealing the identity, whether dead or alive, of people who had actually been in the Auschwitz camps, building on their stories in whatever way. And it's sad that nobody knows Nicholas Gruner's name. People should know his name because it was a valiant fight. And he, to the very end, said, there are people who are stealing our identities. And I go, I've got this feeling that happened a lot more than we think it happened. This is one guy. And by the way, Robert Maxwell then purchased a massive stake early on in McGraw Publishing, McGraw-Hill, which means that, and then his wife was traveling around with Elie Wiesel. And this guy was like, this was not prisoner number, whatever it was. He took his identity. And that's a really terrifying thing to think about, that people with power saw, okay, these people were in camps. Maybe they perished. We can take their identities, take their stories, whatever it is. He never found out what happened to his friend. He assumes he died sometime after the camp. And he did write, it was his friend who wrote the manuscript in Yiddish, and then Elie Wiesel adopted that. And now we have today, as you determine, a Holocaust industry. I'd like you to describe that, but just what I'm telling you, I mean, isn't that just the most terrifying thing ever?
Kyrie, the documentary listed among falsehoods, it said the Holocaust didn't happen. Do you believe the Holocaust
those falsehoods happened? Are unfortunate. And it's not that I don't believe in the Holocaust. I never said that. Never, ever have said it. It's not come out of my mouth. I never tweeted it. I never liked anything like it. So the Holocaust in itself is an event that means something to a large group of people that suffered something that could have been avoided.
Did Ron Dalton write in his book or stated in his movie that the Holocaust did not exist? Remember, that reporter dealing with Kyrie Irving, he said in the movie, Ronald Dalton said that the Holocaust did not exist.
Kyrie, the documentary listed among falsehoods, it said the Holocaust didn't happen.
And I'm going to prove to you, family, that was actually a complete lie. What did Ron Dalton actually write in his book or say in his movie? Now, this is coming from his book, Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. Let's see what he says inside this book as we fact check it. The Jews have established 5 major falsehoods which work to conceal their nature and protect their status and power, to wit. Number 1, the Jews are Israelites, in other words, Hebrews, and thus God's chosen people. Jesus Christ was a Jew. Jesus did not practice Judaism. Jesus' stock was of Levi, Aaron, in other words, Mary, and it says of Judah, Joseph. Number 3, that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II. Notice what it says is many sources and scholars have proven that there were less than 250,000 Jews living in Europe at the time of the Nazis' Third Reich rule. This number was fabricated and was believed to be true by Jewish-controlled media in America. Number 4, that all people are not equal in the religion of Judaism. We are considered goyim or goy, just like cattle. Number 5, that the Jews are just another religious group. In other words, the Jews today are Europeans whose ancestors converted from pagan religions to Judaism religion. Being a Jew, which is a follower of Judaism, is basically a religion. The race of anybody practicing Judaism varies by country. Therefore, the Jews are just a religious group. Quoted by Ashkenazi Jew Harold Wallace Rosenthal. And this is the source, the hidden tyranny, the issue that dwarfs all other issues, the Rosenthal document. And notice what it says here in the footnotes of this book. The Jews have established 5 major falsehoods. Wait a minute. That is coming directly out of Ron Dalton's book, quoting this source by a Ashkenazi Jew. So what they're telling us, basically in a nutshell, if we quote what they say, then we're anti-Semitic by quoting what someone from their community has said. So Ron Dalton is actually quoting from this book. Number 1, the Jews are Israelites and thus God's chosen people. Number 2, Jesus Christ was a Jew. Number 3, that 6 million Jews were killed in a Holocaust during World War II. So it's saying the number, but didn't say that there was no Holocaust, as the reporter said to Kyrie Irving. It says that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II, that all races are equal, or that all are brothers, and number 5, that the Jews are just another religious group.
We don't really know each other, and we're having a serious conversation now. And we should try to parse it, analyze it carefully.
Yeah.
So let me give you, as I understand it, the situation, not just from family history, but from having read quite a lot in the subject at a certain point in my life, having read quite a lot, I would say almost obsessively, because of my family history, and having written on aspects of it. The estimates are there was an extermination campaign by the Nazis. We don't know. 2 main questions remain open. 2 questions remain open. The 2 questions that remain open are when. When did it begin? That still is an ambiguous area. When did this Nazi extermination camp actually begin? Nazi extermination plan. And we still don't know with any kind of certainty why. What was Hitler's exact motive at that point? So the when and the why, they remain gray areas. Now, I have to be, for people who are listening, I have to be careful. I stopped reading about the subject about 20 years ago. So there may be new scholarship which supersedes what I have just said, but that's it. Here are the 2 crucial facts. 1, I don't consider it crucial. The estimates by the best historians are between 5.2 and 5.4 million Jews were killed. It doesn't make much of a difference. Let's say it wasn't, but let's say it was 3 million. That doesn't make it better, obviously. Okay, but the estimates are between 5.2 and 5.4. Now, coming to your question. The Nazi extermination was very efficient. You can use a slur and say it was done with German efficiency. And to some extent, there's a truth to that. You know, what makes a cliche is it's most of the time true. What is a generalization? A generalization is something that's generally true. What's a stereotype? A stereotype is a generalization that you don't like. If you say Jews are smart, Jews like that generalization. If you say something else about Jews, that's a stereotype. But the Germans carried out the Nazi extermination with great efficiency. Why is that important? There were very few survivors. Now, Candace, I'm not trying to, I don't have an axe to grind. I'm just telling you factually. You take my mother. She had 2 sisters and a brother. They were exterminated. She had a mother and father. They were exterminated. My father, I don't know the details, but I know for sure he had 1 sister and 1 brother. These are taboo subjects in my home. Can't talk about them. So I don't know the details. I know they were wiped out. One of the reasons I wasn't bar mitzvahed, I did not have a bar mitzvah. And do you know why? I mean, there are many reasons. My parents were resolute atheists. But one of the reasons was there was no one to invite. You see, a bar mitzvah is a big family event. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, and so forth. Of course, the person being bar mitzvahed invites his or her friends, or it's his friends, the person being bar mitzvahed or bat mitzvahed. But the big thing, it's a family occasion. There was no one to invite. There was no one to invite because the Nazi extermination was very efficient. So the estimates are, at the end of World War II, the estimates are less than 100,000 Jews survived the Nazi Holocaust. Less than 100,000. So that means, where did all these survivors come from? Everybody claims there was a period when the Holocaust industry was in full, was very lucrative. There was a period where everybody claimed to be a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, they all claimed to be Holocaust survivors. They weren't Holocaust survivors. There was a person who...
I actually think they were, but I fear they were survivors of another Holocaust that was going on at the same time, and they may have been, in part, executing it, which is a question that Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes, which is, where did all the Bolsheviks go? And I think, and this is again a theory, while we're allowed to think, well, this is a good opportunity right now to take on the identity of people who perished and just rewrite history of ourselves as the victims. And when I saw that Nicholas Gruner story, I was like, that's so terrifying, because it's required reading coming up in schools. You have to read the story. There's tons of Holocaust people that we could be reading your books, talking about your parents and what they lived through, and they picked this man. And
I will get to the Elie Wiesel. I know it well. In fact, I'm not trying to promote the book. It came out 25 years ago, but I write a lot about Elie Wiesel in the book, okay? So, I remember my father, we both knew a person who had the tattoo. The only place there were tattoos were Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, yeah.
It was the only camp where they had the tattoos. And I said to my father about this person, and my father had the tattoo. I always knew the number. It was like 028128, something like that. I had memorized the number, but now I've forgotten it. I said to my father, I said, do you think he was in Auschwitz? And my father said, no. And my father was not a conspiracy person.
Yeah.
No, he just said very matter-of-factly, non-judgmentally. He just said no. And I said to my father, I asked my father, so where did he get the number? And my father said, and I'm quoting him now, he said, well, after the war, some people took it off and some people put it on.
Poland agrees to change Auschwitz tablets. After 50 years of deflecting the request of Jewish groups, the Polish government has agreed to change the wording on stone tablets at Auschwitz and Birkenau, the adjacent Nazi camps where more than 1 million Jews died during World War II. The move follows decades of appeals by Jewish groups who say the current plaques do not fully reflect the suffering of Jews there and focus too heavily on the camp's non-Jewish victims. So they're saying that, according to them, at Auschwitz, that number is highlighting those that were non-Jewish. But notice what they say. While thousands of non-Jews were among the estimated 1.5 million killed at Auschwitz, the victims were predominantly Jewish. This is the original tablet. 4 million people suffered and died here at the hands of the Nazis. Murders between the years 1940 and 1945 said 4 million. But then when we go to the newest or the more up-to-date plaque, it says here, forever let this place be a cry of despair and a warning to humanity, where the Nazis murdered about 1.5 million men, women, and children. But notice the wording here. It says mainly Jews. So even with this 1.5 million, it's saying they were not all from the Jewish community. It goes from 4 million to 1.5 million. So if you take 2.5 million and subtract that from 6 million, that's going to put you down to 3.5 million. That's just at Auschwitz. So according to the anti-Semitic laws, what they're saying is, if you say or give the proof that I just shared, that there was 2.5 million numbers removed from that overall 6 million number, that can be considered an exaggeration.
Learn how to play ball. That's what the Zionists did, except instead of a baseball team, they went to try to convince the Jews that the Jewish people are a nation, like France and like Spain. We'll get a land, that's Israel, that's our stadium. We'll get baseball bats and balls, we'll create a language. They sat down to create a language because nations need languages. You can convert to Judaism, you can't convert to a blood family. You cannot convert to a race. Judaism is a religion, that's all it is. The religion created the Jewish people. The definition of a Jewish person is somebody who is transformed by receiving the Torah.
Who the hell are you anyway, right? I mean, anyway, I don't care where they came from. I don't care about religion. I don't care about any of the gobbledygook, right? But a bunch of Aryan-looking people that comes from Eastern Europe and pretends that God gave them the land 2,000, 3,000 years ago, right? And oh no, we're the real Jews.
But he didn't say it as a joke.
Yeah, he's just like, this is,
the
incentive here is to have one.
Yes,
it's bad.
yes.
It's incentives. It's incentive culture, obviously. I
So,
talk about this as welfarism. If you're going to incentive bad behavior, people are going to do it.
Yes, I without going into that because I was on tangent, but yes. And my father said very matter-of-factly. So my mother used to get very frustrated because even more so than my father, she could never let go of what happened to her family. She couldn't let go. And there was something that really more than grated on her when people who didn't pass through what she passed through claimed to have passed through it. And she once exclaimed in a kind of bitter irony, she said, if everybody who claims to be a Holocaust survivor actually is one, who did Hitler kill? So everybody's claiming to be a Holocaust survivor. There are very few, a handful survived that ordeal. Now,
especially particularly in Auschwitz, because there's so many were like, well, you said the tattoo.
There were the death camps, and then there were the concentration camp death camps. There were both work camps and Auschwitz and Majdanek. I once spoke to the world's leading authority in the Nazi Holocaust, Raoul Hilberg, who was very kind to me. He was of your political persuasion. He was a right-wing Republican. He swore by the Wall Street Journal. I was at the other end of the spectrum, and I was a total pariah. However, don't ask me why, because I've never really understood it. He kept defending me. I was always very nervous around him. I didn't want to say anything wrong because he was kind of my savior. He was saying that what Finkelstein is writing is true. And when the tenure battle erupted at DePaul University, he gave this very moving defense of me. And he said that I told the truth. It was at a very big price, he said. But he said, in the history of those writing about history, Finkelstein's place is secure. In any event, I once asked him, he lived in Vermont. He taught at the University of Vermont. He was very much his own person, so he could never get a job at a top university. He said, very few women survived Majdanek. That's where my mother was. Very few people. So it was worse, actually. The women's section was worse than at Auschwitz. In any event, once the Holocaust industry became an industry, they were very picky about who they promoted. Now, Elie Wiesel was a fanatical supporter of Israel. He was fanatically pro anything that any American government would say. And so he became the spokesperson for the Holocaust. As to his personal history, I'm just going to give you the details as I understand them, okay? He claims he was in Auschwitz. He claimed that he was in Auschwitz. And he describes in the book Night, he describes some scenes which Raoul Hilberg, the person I mentioned to you from the person who defended me in for reasons which still remain, except integrity, which is so rare. He was the chief historian for the Holocaust Memorial in Washington. Elie Wiesel personally picked him because Wiesel knew his stuff. And he said there were certain scenes that Wiesel describes in Night that occurred at Auschwitz. Wiesel, Hilberg said they could not have happened. They could not
without question,
happened.
they didn't happen. You read Nicholas Gruner, yeah. It's like...
When Wiesel was confronted with Hilberg saying they happened, he doubled down and said they did happen. Wiesel, I knew some, not many, I knew some first-rank Holocaust historians, and they told me he was deported in 1944 from Hungary. That was one of the last deportations from Hungary. And he maybe passed through Auschwitz en route to a labor camp. That may have happened, according to the people I talked to. But there was clearly, I discuss it at some length in that little book. Wiesel figures not in a cameo role, but he has a major, he's a star of the Holocaust industry.
Yeah, I'm glad that I put Nicholas Gruner on your radar because he just knew the guy. He literally stole his identity. I mean, it's a crazy.
I remember,
he knew him because obviously when you're in a camp together, and he was like just so excited to re-meet this someone who had this experience with him and described the march, everything, and the soles of his feet, and he just was like, what he did was the real person wrote the manuscript, and this gypsy just took on his identity and. When he describes that moment of being on the plane, what am I going to say to him? Like, we haven't seen each other. And then, could you imagine being confronted and going, wait a second, you're not Norm Finkelstein. You're not Norm. That is, and he said, but he had cameras ready and they shook hands. And then he even said, what's even crazier is the real Holocaust survivor spoke Hungarian.
Well, that is
and Elie couldn't speak Hungarian at this time when this happened. And so he says to him, let's speak in English. It's just an incredible thing to comprehend that. And I think the best that I can guess is that you had these psychopaths, true Bolshevik psychopaths who were like, well, we can't just walk in and be like, well, I was just kind of running the Bolshevik camp over here, mass murdering Christians. So what better way to reintroduce yourself into society than to be like, I'm the ultimate victim. I survived the Auschwitz camp. I think that's what happened. I think they laundered they laundered through, and that's why there's so much confusion. And people are like, you're denying that people died here, because there's some people that are like, well, nothing ever happened, And it's like, no, something definitely. You read this guy Nicholas Gruner, and you're like, this happened. And there are some people who never lived a day in their lives of that, and I say Elie Wiesel is one of them, who took their personalities, took their identities, full on gypsy.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.